Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Sunday Bunch. My name is Tony Vear, and I'm a coach and leader of the Sunday Bunch happening. And we got a bunch of folks on the sofa here, on the couch. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Nick, introduce yourself.
My name is Nick Haddam, or NLH Haddam for my poetry, and I'm the resident Discordian witch.
And now we got Mr. Anthony. Go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
I am Anthony Irving Nance.
Okay. And last but not least, ladies, Jonka, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I am Jonka, but I am the real Shirley Temple, and I'm not dead, and I'm not 24 years older than I am. And today I want to be, because if this is going to be broadcast, I want to start getting back I was never paid, I want to get back my identity.
Okay. Beautiful. So today's topic is, do you have a brain? Or does your brain have you? And the reason for that topic is people be wondering why their relationships don't work. But the problem is they think that there's something wrong with somebody else, or like life don't work, or, there's a kind of a junky kind of thing, or life doesn't like them. When they don't realize that they need to manage their brain, grab their brain back so they can start thinking, because we're thinking creatures. So that's what this topic is about. So, question. What do you think about what I just said? Questions, comments, just interested.
Well, I'm a sort of a believer in, and I'm not going to remember his name, but the psychologist who sort of pioneered dealing with existential crisis. He talked about how the human personality, like we don't actually have like an innate personality. We're filters, right? That our entire brain and all of our senses are just about processing the data that we experience, and the kind of build-up of interpretations or the build-up of choices over that is where your personality like develops from, but that we innately are, just like a sponge. Things just flow through us. We are meant to observe, not necessarily to reflect. That's part of a sort of longer, like the Buddhist concept of meditation, where you can quiet your mind enough to be able to look at your own mind, right? And so I think we're in one of those troubling symbiotic relationships, right? That the spirit needs the body, and the body needs the spirit, and neither of those two things can exist without the other. And so, I have to compromise.
Okay, great. And I got another question for you.
Yeah.
What you said was so good, I got to ask. But, so the next question is, how does that affect relationships? How do you apply what you just said to romantic relationships?
Oh, well, it's that each person is the center of their own world. And I mean, for me, it's sort of like, I guess, fundamentally, it's that we as humans depend on one another. We are also the only other apex predator right? Like, we are both the most dangerous thing to one another and the only thing we need. So I think that creates a very hard a hard balance between a relationship of what are you taking from the other person versus what is being given. And right, like, and who's in charge of that, and who has the power, and who has the decision to say all of those things. And I think it's a hard juggle to find ways to love the most dangerous thing to you in the world.
Got it. Fascinating. Okay. So, Anthony, what do you think about this concept called do you have a brain, or does your brain have you?
Well, it seems like you want to know, do I have thoughts, or am I so engulfed in my thoughts that I don't have control of myself? And in that respect, it falls back to what Nick said, a conversation we had about this already, so we kind of covered it. And it's like everyone has a brain, but whether or not you've risen to the level to understand how to handle having a brain, or how to receive the fact that everything is going to be the way that it is, and you need to find out how to get along with yourself and love yourself in order to love the rest of the people the same way. Otherwise, it's going to be destruction as usual.
Thank you. I got that. Okay, Jonka, what's your opinion about this concept and what you heard so far?
Well, I agree with both of Nick and Anthony. And I wanted to add to what Nick says. I like Eric Erickson is a American psychologist, and he goes from the very beginning to the end of life, and he makes it look like almost like your book, like trust versus
What book?
antitrust.
They need to know what book you're talking about. What book you talking about?
Your book about oh my goodness, the understanding a male
Let me give you.
qualifying men, qualifying men.
Qualifying
Yes,
men.
that
Yes.
book. Yes. So, but I tend to believe in it's up to society, government, education, all the institutions. We're under God or money, and it's a little dangerous. And my friends that are into economists, they're saying that the generation is not teaching the new generation. So I said, you know what it's called? Degenerative generations. And this is what's happening in all the stores and everywhere else and all the customer care and that has an effect on relationships. So I think as far as the question goes, I think I'm a teacher, so I know that our body is made up many systems, but we're not an automobile. As Nick says, we have a spirit, and the spirit is the breath. God is our breath, and He wants to be called I am in Exodus 5 or Exodus 3:14. So I base my life on that because I know that I have faith, and I try to. His commandments are good, but the brain is part of the system. You know, it's the musculature system. Actually, it's a muscle, and if you don't use it, it gets soft. And what's sad is because of the cameras and electricity. Electricity in our country is hydropower, and that's water. Our planet is mostly water, and our body also. We have water, solid liquids, and gases inside of us. So I believe that what has happened to society is like Nick mentioned about Buddhism. You have to belong to one of the Pentagon to me is a synagogue, a mosque, a temple, a cathedral, or a church. And that's what teaches from early childhood as far as, um, Eric Erickson, if you look up his theories, I have them on my phone, but you need to know and teach what a sin is, because a sin is breaking the Ten Commandments, and that's for everybody. So, and all those religions have that. So then once you teach somebody that's to show love in a relationship, even for a man and a woman. Like to me, adultery is breaking a contract, and
Unless they didn't care about that and they say, let's have an open marriage, an open relationship, because that's an agreement. But if they don't say that, then what you say is correct.
That's true. I agree with that. I agree.
You said adultery. The only way to be an adulterer is if you made that contract in the beginning.
That's correct.
So if you made that contract and then you breached that contract, you are an adulterer.
That is accurate.
But I would like to say that, and listening to Ms. Jonka, that it seems that we all come to the same revelation from different perspectives or points of view that the world is systematically, historically insane. Everyone thinks they're going to keep doing the same foolishness and get different results, and when the results are not different, they start screaming and yelling about it because, oh, I said this way, or I said that way, or I think like this way, or I think like that way. And the truth of the matter is, we need to do like the get along game. Can we all just get along? It'd be very simple. As she said, breaching the contract. Why not just simply be honest? There is in honesty, then you could truly find where you belong. If you be honest, you could find where you belong, what time you belong there, and what you belong doing at that time. Because if you compile honesty with kindness and love, there is only a win-win situation like that.
So, beautiful. Here's the segue. segue is, do you have a brain or does your brain have you? The more you have your brain, the more powerful your life is going to be. Because you're right, Ms. Jonka, that the brain is the most powerful muscle in our body. It's also the operating software system in our body. You can compare our brain to Microsoft, Apple, all those other types of software operational structures. Google's got its own operational structure. So we have a brain that's that way. And until we actually understand which design our brain is going to tell us what to do. And here's the reason why this conversation is happening in the first place. And it's especially with romantic relationships, but all relationships. So let me scroll up here. The brain's processing system is that it has a 5-stage process. The first thing is we observe something that happens. The second thing is we have a feeling about what we observed. We have an interpretation of that. It's a feeling because the thought comes after that. The thought is we have a thought about what we just felt. So we interpret our feelings rather than thinking first and feeling. And then we have to decide between, do we follow our feelings or do we follow our thoughts? And then we take action. And a lot of times, taking action is procrastination. The action I'm going to take is I'm taking no action. Because people are still trying to sit around and fundamentally understand things. Now, when you think about this, we don't realize that the most powerful piece of this, I was going to ask you what you think is the most powerful piece, but I was going to jump in and say that. The most powerful piece is that you observe something. Because it's what's your interpretation of what you observed. Your feeling is going to come up based on your concept of what you observed. Let me give you an example real quick. Use an example of a broken glass. If you're at work and there's an office, there's a kitchen, feet from the office, you get a glass break in the office, you're like, wow, that sucks. Feel sorry for them, hope they clean it up. And you go back to work, forget about it, Now, you do it in the house, you're cooking something, and you hear behind you, the glass breaks, somebody did something stupid, and you're like, why you break the glass? Come on now, man, you shouldn't do that no more. Don't do that no more, especially if you're a parent and got kids, right? The third example is you're home, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're by yourself, everybody's out, and all of a sudden you wake up because you heard a glass break in the kitchen. Different thought, different interpretation of what you observed, a glass breaking. Depending on where it's at, you're gonna have a different thought, a different feeling. And unless you know that, you're just gonna react because you're gonna do whatever your feelings tell you to do. You actually have to think, be conscious of what you're aware of, because if you don't, then you're gonna react in your romantic relationships, and your partner's gonna be like, "What's wrong with you?" Or your partner's gonna be like, "Oh, they're a wimp," or all this other stuff that's like not empowering, not supportive, not powerful. So I want to hear your opinions about that. Then we'll take it further.
Well, I suppose for me, some of this is what makes it tricky is that one, can you even trust your observations, right? Like, are you in fact observing anything that is related to reality? There's a lot of science that says all of our senses aren't actually giving us reality. They're just giving us only the small portion of it that allows us to engage in the survival of the fittest, right? That we're not actually seeing anything that doesn't help us perpetuate the survival of our species. So whether or not we're actually aware of 90% of what's going on isn't important. It's actually better for our biology if we put a certain amount of blinders on. But it's also that as humans, it's this, it's like a sculpture, right? Observing something in 3D means that any given point by which you look at it, you're looking at something fundamentally different from anyone else. No one else can literally stand in the same place as you. And even with a photo, you're taking a snapshot of a time. So, no one can in fact ever see anything from the same place and time as anyone else does, because right, we occupy that direction, I suppose.
Unless you videotape it from every side.
Well, right, this is where we are starting to do some of those things, right? They recently, I think it was in what was it? It was like Chasing in Color. It's this like David Attenborough nature documentary, but they created a new kind of like way of filming, so that it's a camera that can capture ultraviolet, right? It can capture the full spectrum of light, even though we only see from red to blue. And so it can capture the full spectrum, but then it reflects it back onto a camera that can see our spectrum. So it's a way that we can now shift between seeing something like what the flower looks like to our cones and like retinal rods and cones versus something like the mantis shrimp that can see, I think it's that they have over 18 different rods and cones, whereas we only have 3 of red, blue, and green, or red, blue, and yellow. Right, but that means that there are all of these colors. And I guess it's things like, so something like the color purple is in fact an imaginary color. We cannot see the wavelength of that. I mean, some people are actually evolving the ability to see certain colors, but it's that when our brain sees that wavelength, it merely combines the 2 ends of our sight spectrum to create what we see as the color purple. But that color, it doesn't necessarily actually exist the way that we perceive it in nature. So I guess, right, like that's what's always tricky when people say, like, you know, what did you see? What did you experience of the? It is all kind of very, very relative to me.
Because 2 people can call the same color a different color.
Well, exactly, right? Like people who are colorblind don't necessarily know they're colorblind because they'll say they can still differentiate between grays and call, you know, their gray green or like any of that. Yeah.
Love it.
I think that.
Go ahead.
I think that from watching the movie Holly Kane, when she submerged herself underwater and played a tape of subconscious thought and speeded it up really fast. She had no idea that the gentleman who gave her the facility came in when she was subconscious and put his own tape in. So then the man made her think that she was involved and in love with him. And then another gentleman came along knowing how this can happen, and he told her, stop thinking, just feel. And this is how she was able to break out of it. So your observation, what you feel, is like people tell you, you go with your first instinct. Your first instinct was the feeling. The feeling, more than likely, is probable that your feeling was the truth. And your thoughts, you second guess yourself and come up with something that you make up for yourself to comfort yourself and get away from the fear of unknown. When it should just simply be embraced, because how are you going to be more enlightened, you know, and grow so that things can be accomplished in fruition if you don't do something different?
Okay. So, what I want to talk about here now is to give you the solution to this problem, this issue. It's not a problem, it's an issue that we just don't understand. And that is by understanding how to determine accuracy, clarity, and workability all combined in whatever you're dealing with. So to give you an example of what I mean by that is, if you were trapped underwater and you wanted to figure out how to get out from under the water, what's the best, most guaranteed way you could do that? Anybody can answer that.
Swim up.
Well, how do you know you're swimming up? It's the question. How can you guarantee you're swimming up? I'll just tell you, blow a bubble and then follow the bubble. Because the bubble only knows how to do one thing, no questions about it, right? So you want to be able to do that. The way to control your perception, your observation, is to begin collecting empowering context, or as they used to call them and still do, philosophical ideas. Philosophies work. I know that we all have some of those in us, but we don't respect it because we just think it's an idea. But I'll give you a couple real quick, and then I'll wrap this up. So the first one is, when it comes to romantic relations, one of the ones I got was, just because somebody wants you, it's not a good enough reason for them to want you back. When I got that, I got so much peace out of being with somebody who wasn't interested in me, that I could relax and go about my business and not even make them wrong. You know, and so this whole point of this session is so that you can learn how to control your mind, so you can meet people where they are, or stand there and take care of yourself and not be a follower or not be a victim and be powerful around this. And so that's what this is about. And that's our Sunday Bunch for today.
I'm going to just say something. When I think that when you talk about your D deciding what to follow, feelings and thoughts, that's, as an educator, that's cognitive. Cognitive is you think about thinking. And both of these, I agree with what they're saying, but you have to understand today we have this artificial intelligence, which is like, we don't reinvent the wheel. We're the first nation with the moving camera and the image, and use it appropriately. Like the red, in the TV used to have the little dots of red, green, and yellow, not the primary colors. But because I like to make kids have hands-on stuff, and I make them with crayons, and this is what's really serious. With crayons, I make them make the primary colors, which are red, yellow, and blue, and then I make them make the secondary colors, purple, orange, and green. Now they're messing with the colors because they're not using healthy stuff, and some of the crayons, it doesn't do it. So they want to make their wrong be right, and we have to be very careful about that, because your brain is the most powerful muscle, but it works from your nose, your eyes, your mouth, your ears, and your hands. And every one of us, I'd like to know, what is your most sense that you use? I use smelling.
So we're going to bring that topic back for the next session, and because what you said is powerful, and it still accounts for the fact that we need to pay attention to what we're paying attention to, so we can know how to pay attention to it accurately, and especially in deals with romantic relationships. So this is the end of the session for the Sunday Bunch, and my peeps over here have a great time.
1, 2, 3, the Sunday Bunch, the Sunday Bunch. That's the way we became the Sunday Bunch.
All right now. Hey.